During an afternoon break on the third day, I was crossing a little bridge curved over a gully and saw Rona headed towards my way. As is customary when students approach each other in retreat, they do not look up. They give a slight gauchot with palms pressed together, accompanied with a bow. Usually, there's a sense of mutuality and respect in that tiny gesture of acknowledgement. Yet in an instant, I felt a sense of repulsion so powerful that my foot caught in one of the bridge's slats, and I lurched forward, barely able to maintain my balance. Unnerved, I forced myself not to look at her, fearing if I glanced up, she might also do so. I dreaded what I would see in her eyes, or what she would see in mine. Afterwards, I found myself checking to see if she was around. Unavoidably, as we passed each other twice, and with each encounter, I was shaken by the thought that this awful toxicity came only from myself. The final day arrived when the Dharma combat was to take place. The morning sun broke through early on that mist-filled mountain. I awoke having slept deeply, my spirits restored and strong. After one period of meditation, breakfast was served, followed by a short break. When the great Bansho bell rang, the students entered the meditation hall. After everyone was seated, I slowly walked up to the altar and gave 3 full prostrations, my whole body and forehead touching the ground. Light filtered gently through the window's shoji screens and settled on a vast stillness. Sitting on my zafu at one end of the altar, while my teacher, Chiba Roshi, sat on the other side, I faced the students. One at a time, the students, their faces somber and impassive, rose and made a full prostration. Seated, I bowed in return. Then, poised upright on their knees, each Dharma combatant asked me a question. Everything went by so quickly, I had no time to logically process the exchanges. I felt aligned with the spontaneous intuitive self and was seized with the clarity of mind. An elderly man asked, "What happens to us when we die?" I answered, "There is no life or death." One of the newer students queried, "What do you think is the sound of one hand clapping?" I answered, "You think one hand can clap?" Sometimes the answers seemed thin, but I held fast, focused, and without fear, like a dragon shooting flames. The vessel of truth was in my hands, and I tended it steadily. Then it was Rona's turn. As she approached the tatami mat, I was struck by her bearing. Despite my aversion, I noted that she carried herself with grace and simplicity. She performed a deep prostration, then, resting her weight on her knees, the palms of her hands together, she looked at me steadily. Her voice rang out, crystalline and pure, when she asked, "Who are you?" This was the first time I'd ever directly looked at her face to face and heard the sound of her voice. I felt pulled in by a potent undertow. I saw her deep blue eyes, clear, unflinching, her blonde hair artlessly gleaming against her dark robes. I felt the center of my being tilt. A wave of rage reared up and suffused me with a great heat. How dare she ask who I was? I was a person she had robbed of 2 years of what ought to have been the happiest time in my life. Did she think I would ever deign to talk to her? I would rather be reincarnated as a worm than let one word escape my lips. Mind and body fell into a dark abyss, as if the Dharma scepter itself had been flung to the floor. A vast, painful sorrow flooded my heart, and my eyes filled with tears. Before a drop could roll down my face, I placed my hands in gasho and bowed to her. She bowed back and returned to her seat. After the ceremony, I walked down the steps of the zendo, numb and at a loss as to what to think or how to feel. People came up to me and said what an incredible job I had done. And Chiba Roshi approached and said, "Let me congratulate you on your answer to Rona. Your deep compassion and heartfelt bow displayed a subtle understanding of your original self." Roche's face lit up like a child's, exuding an artless translucency. I could only meet his inexpressible openness with confusion. Had my answer indeed come from a genuine source of wisdom? Or was I a fraud, accepting my triumph with the shameless satisfaction of refusing to speak to Rona? As I was about to leave, I saw Rona carrying a duffel bag headed for her car. I hesitated, my body leaning towards her. The distance between us seemed too great. I heard the door of her car slam shut, the engine start, and she was gone, taking with her my questions and leaving me in silence.
Wow.